So real quick history. 100 years ago, there was no St. Armand's Key, Lido Key, anything like that. There were a whole bunch of little islands out here called the Several Islands. Some of those islands were so small they called them islets, okay? And very few settlers came out here. A few people would come out here and attempt to farm or something like that, but it was mostly sandy soil. In the late 1880s, there was a guy named Charles St. Armand of French descent who bought some land out here. He bought, I think, 3 islands, and he attempted to fish and grow vegetables out here. He sold the land in 1893, and then it got, or 1894 he sold it, and then it got bought, sold until 1917, when John Ringling bought all these islands out here, okay? And then in 1926 or thereabouts, he partnered with Owen Burns, or after 23, he partnered with Owen Burns, and because Owen Burns had some dredgers that he could dredge up stuff, and so they dredged up all these islands and filled them in. So then you all of a sudden you have one continuous island out here, and he began to develop it as Ringling Isles, okay? And so that opened in 1926. He built the first bridge. The bridge he came out over is probably the 4th or 5th bridge today. He built the first bridge out here that allowed people to come out here. His sister was living in the one house on Bird Key, so he built a little causeway there so she could come out and drive into town. He didn't have to take the road anymore to make all those things kind of convenient. So he developed Ringling Isles. There's a few homes that are still left that he built in the early 20s, and we'll stop and look at those along our ride. They're nice old Mediterranean homes. So anyway, he opened this up in February 17th, 1926, 100 years ago, and had all these houses and stuff out here, okay? So that was the Ringling Estates. Now, moving up into the 50s, for those of you that have moved here in the last however many years, I mean, Sarasota seems like this kind of modern, maybe modern with it, place where everybody gets along. Not true. Florida was a lot like the Deep South in the 50s and the early 60s. We had a lot of segregation. So in the 50s, black people were not allowed to come to any of the beaches out here. They went to the city commission and they asked the city commission to give them a small section of beach like this area over here where they could come out with their families and friends and go to the beach. Well, the city commission was so freaked out about that they didn't want them having beaches. So they said, well, we'll build you a pool in Newtown. And they go, well, thanks a lot. We don't really want a pool, we want a beach. So this went on and on for years and years and years. And so the black people started like the first kind of civil disobedience, that they would come out here sometimes on Sundays after church and would come out, and you could walk out there now, and there were rocks out there, and they would walk out to the beach and just hang out for 15, 20 minutes to make their presence known, and then they would leave. Okay? And that went on for quite a while.
Can you excuse us, please? Sorry. Thank you.
So they would make their presence known. And this went on for like a long time. Civil Rights Act of 1964 got passed, and you would think that that would have changed things in the South, but it really didn't. It wasn't until like 1969 that black people were actually able to come out on the beaches. Now before that, when they kept asking for a beach and asking for a beach, they did build them a swimming pool in Newtown, but they kept asking for a beach. So what did they do? They gave them a partial beach way out in Venice, 20 miles from here, where the buses didn't run. Most black people back then didn't have cars, so there was no way to get out there. So it was just kind of worthless. It was like a little worthless gesture. So again, it was like the late 60s, 5 years after the Civil Rights Act was passed, before black people could actually come out on the beaches without being harassed, something like that. So the Lido Beach Casino was built with money from the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal in the 30s, the WPA, the Workers Project Administration. And the architect on this building was Ralph Twitchell. Ralph Twitchell came here in the 20s and worked building the Cottazon, the John Ringling Mansion. And then he liked being in Florida a lot better than being up north, so he stayed here and hung out a shingle and became a very well-known architect. And in the 50s, he partnered with Paul Rudolph, and they started the Sarasota School of Architecture, which is another story. So this was the hangout all through my childhood. To come out to Lido Beach Casino, there was a nightclub here, there was a restaurant here, there were all kinds of shops out here. There's just this beautiful thing made out of shell. But that was started in the 40s. By the 50s, though, they'd kind of let it go and it got kind of run down. So in the 64th, there was a bond issue to restore it. And that bond issue passed by vote by a 2-to-1 margin to restore and modernize it, okay? So in 1965, there was an architect here, Tim Siebert, who submitted plans for remodeling it. Nothing was done. The bond issue had passed, the people had spoken, they wanted to see it get restored, and architect has done a rendering of remodeling it, and nothing was done. 65, 69, there were new plans to do this, and nothing was done. Then all of a sudden, in February 1969, without telling anybody, they brought records out and tore it down. The people that were in charge of tearing it down, now the city commission's argument was it's old, it's decrepit, it's fallen down, it's not safe, we need to tear it down and build something. The people who were in charge of tearing it down said, this was such a strong structure, it would have lasted another 50 years without any kind of change or development at all. And if it had been rejuvenated, remodernized, it could have lasted 100 years or more, but it got torn down. So I came out here a couple months later, I graduated from high school in 69, I come out here and I went like, where did my memories go? Where did the casino go? They just kind of tore it down without telling everybody. And finally, years later, one of the city commissioners, former city commissioners at that time, admitted that it was like probably the biggest mistake of his life. So this is South Lido Park. That's Big Path right there coming in from the Gulf out there. And this is another area that was settled by a pioneer named Otto Schmidt Zoldan. In 1904, he applied for a homestead out here. He finally got it granted in 1910. So the idea of the homestead was this was government land, and if you homesteaded it, if you lived on it for 5 years and you built your own home and made it self-productive, then you could get it for free from the government for 5 years. So it just kind of gives you a little bit of history there. In the late 60s, Arvida, which developed most of Longboat, wanted to develop all of this property here too. But by the late 60s, people in Sarasota were getting sick of all the development because it was like a major period of growth. Maybe not as bad as it is today, but it was pretty bad. And so some environmental groups got started and really started to fight this development. So basically they shut down Arvida from developing this area. So Arvida thought, okay, well, I guess we'll have to sell it then if we can't develop it. So they first offered it to the city since we're in the city limits, and the city, for whatever reason, would not take it. So then the county came in and bought it. This is an odd little thing where we're in the city of Sarasota, but it's kind of managed by Sarasota County. So you have that. So we're probably not going to see them, but gopher tortoises are abundant here. Gopher tortoises are on the endangered species list. And tortoises are land animals, turtles are water or aquatic animals. So it says here they don't swim, but I found out differently. Yesterday I was doing volunteer work at North Jetties Park in Nokomis for World Oceans Day, and I was helping with the kayak outing. And the leader of the kayak outing was a county employee. Was telling me that actually gopher tortoises can swim a little bit. They don't want to, but if they fall in or some idiot sticks them in the water because they think they're a turtle, they can actually swim a little bit. But by and large, if you see a tortoise, you don't want to put them in the water. And usually tortoises have, I mean, you can see how dry the shell or carapace looks there, and turtles generally have kind of a wet look on their carapace. That's one fairly easy way to tell them apart generally, but mostly gopher tortoises are protected. You're not supposed to touch them, you're not supposed to pick them up or do anything like that. And anyway, there's a little bit of information there on how they burrow, and other animals make their home in their burrows and things like that, so they protect other animals as well. Just something to know about gopher tortoises.